Thank you for joining us again and welcome back to our channel. We appreciate your time as always. In this episode, I really want to look at why African leaders continue to be disrespected and ignored in the global circles. Folks, I have a very important video to play, but this will shock you because an African president left Africa to attend a very important summit, international summit, that was meant to combat the climate change conversation that has engulfed the world. And Africa has decided to take a central stage, despite them being not one of those regions that contributed hugely into the climate disaster that we all are seeing. Now, the president left the countries and made all the necessary arrangements and traveled to Europe, only to attend the event, and no Western leader showed up.
And that's why earlier this week, African leaders traveled to the Africa Adaptation Summit in Rotterdam, Netherlands, but European partners did not turn up, and that was strongly criticized by African leaders.
Now, let me repeat this. The two African presidents left their countries. One of the leaders' country have over 90 million people, and the other one have over 11 million people, and they traveled to Europe to attend an international event where they thought that's where they were going to voice out their concern. And we are talking about, this was very close to the COP event in Egypt, so to point out. But amazingly, they were disrespected to an extent where the private sector never showed up. The governments of these nations never showed up. How embarrassing is that? It goes back to what, I will play the video in a second. It goes back to what Kenyan leader, the famous statement where he made by saying this.
And sometimes we are mistreated.
Yeah.
You know, we are loaded into buses like school kids. You know, and it's not right.
Well, you are summoned. You know,
it's not right.
Now, if a leader, for a problem they did not cause, for an impact they did not contribute to an extent, they have decided to make an effort to reduce the amount of all the significant contribution in terms of lowering the emissions and sacrificing their economies just to meet the rich countries' limits that they want to, and nobody shows up. I think that is disrespectful. Let's roll the clip.
I would also like to deplore the absence of leaders of the industrialized nations, as well as the representatives of the private sector. They are the biggest polluters and would have had to answer to our questions here.
I want to note with a taste of bitterness the absence of the leaders of the industrialized world. I think that if we made the effort to leave Africa and come to Rotterdam, it was easier for the others to be here. They are the main polluters of the planet, and they are the ones who have to finance adaptation. And as we've observed, the private sector, one of the main polluters, is also absent. That gives us a taste of unfinished business before even starting this meeting. I just had to express this disappointment.
The absence of European leaders clearly disappointing for African leaders.
Again, it goes back to what I've been saying, that African nations should select their strategic engagement more carefully and vet their geopolitical partners carefully on how they navigate global issues, on how they engage strategically important global conversation. It is important. Of two leaders, they left their nation and come to a global event, and the private sector got them ignored, and the governments of the continent got them ignored. How devastating is that? And how shameful it is. It goes back without saying that this could only happen to African leaders. And if such approach continues, it goes back to see what we are looking at the moment, why these leaders are pushing back on several areas. It's not only about colonialism or about France's situation, but there are little things like this, because I assure you, they will never go to China for an event and then the Chinese president will not show up, or the Chinese prime minister will not show up. That will never happen. I mean, some African leaders even go to those events and they are showered with red carpet reception. This is a leader of a country, the second largest French-speaking country in the world. Yes. And he left all the things he's supposed to do to travel to Europe. It's an embarrassment. It's a disgrace, a shameful situation. How could this be a possibility happening in the 21st century? This happened as recently as 2022.
I want to note with a taste of bitterness the absence of the leaders of the industrialized world. I think that if we made the effort to leave Africa and come to Rotterdam, it was easier for the others to be here. They are the main polluters of the planet, and they are the ones who have to finance adaptation.
The group of presidents, this happened in Rotterdam. And how shameful was that? It goes back to say that, like I said, Africa should charter a new part in its strategic engagement. The continent must make sure that it can vet those partners carefully. It goes a long way to look at how these leaders decide to select their partners. It is important in the global sphere. If they can't do that, then they will continue to be disrespected, they will continue to be embarrassed, they will continue to be looked down upon. Because, I mean, before a leader leaves a country, I don't know how these diplomatic arrangements are being placed. Before a president, is it just that the president, they love traveling to Europe, or they just want to go abroad? Because with such a huge climate conference in the city of Rotterdam, then no leader showed up. It's an embarrassing situation. We cannot just hide it. That's really fundamentally a shame.
Yes, it is very important because we want the world to understand that we do not want to come to the table as victims. That's not what we want to do. We want to come, we have our own ideas. We believe we can make a contribution towards sorting out this global challenge. It's affecting us the most. We have contributed the least, but that is not the conversation. We are telling the globe that we have ideas on how to sort out this problem. And we want Africa to be part of the answer. We are not going to accept to continue to be labeled as victims.
So, my suggestion is, before these leaders leave their countries, they have to have some amount, or they must have a guarantee that the leaders of those countries will be showing up as well. It goes back to what the Kenyan president said. Like him or hate him, he clearly said it, that sometimes we are disrespected. And that is why they famously said, though that did not hold, that we really don't want to continue to attend all these meetings and all these summits, because it makes no sense actually.
I would also like to deplore the absence of leaders of the industrialized nations, as well as the representatives of the private sector. They are the biggest polluters and would have had to answer to our questions here.
But again, with the climate importance, the countries of the continent of Africa must choose their battle carefully. There is huge impact in the country of Malawi, impact of climate in Nigeria and other regions. But again, where these decisions are being made, If leaders do not take it seriously, the leaders who have actually caused the global impact that we all are facing, then Africa, that needs to make a huge sacrifice, should approach this in a cautious way. I made a video with regards to this particular thing going on as climate change, that they should focus on it. Africa should embrace it in a very cautious way. So it's important.
The only conversation that is being discussed about loss and damage is 100 billion. It is not a tenth. It is not 1%. So we are being consigned to a debate at the corner about loss and damage adaptation, when the real conversation about investment is happening elsewhere.
And as we've observed, the private sector, one of the main polluters, is also absent. That gives us a taste of unfinished business before even starting this meeting. I just had to express this disappointment.
I want to thank you for watching. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think with regards to such a behavior, and if such things should continue happening to the continent of African leaders, or Africa's geopolitical partners should, to an extent, wake up and start recognizing that, because the disrespect is going beyond the ordinary.
When we forego our resources, what do we get for it? There must be a candid conversation. So what happens? So that it is not a conversation of, oh, you guys, you cannot do this. You have to keep the forest. You have to keep Lake Victoria. You have to invest in the environment. And we are doing all this so that what happens? This is the conversation more that we need to have.
Folks, smash the like button and share the video. And let me know what you think if this continuous disrespect from the geopolitical circle, the global engagement, and why this continues to happen to the leaders of this particular continent. Is there a particular reason for this? Or they said, if you make yourself to be a banana and the monkey will eat you.
Just look at what's happening now. On average, every American man, woman, and child puts out 16 tons of carbon every year. Europe does 6.5. China does 6 to 7 tons per person every year. Here, we're putting nothing, very little. Some of us put half ton, some put 1 ton. South Africa is the only country in Africa which put something out, which is like 6 or 7, like Europe, or because using a lot of coal. But that's an outlier situation. 53 countries were not putting anything.
And the conversation has been a good conversation. We are focused on adaptation. We are focused on loss and damage and that conversation. From where I sit, that conversation is structured from somewhere. It is not a conversation that we have generated from our end. We also have ideas on how we can fix this global problem.
And if we are all equal, and there is a question here, if our friends accept that we are all equal, but let's assume we are all equal, then every man, woman, child in the world is entitled to 3 tons. How about this assumption? We say, okay, 3 tons is the limit. You guys put out in Europe 6 or 7 tons per head. You need to pay into that trust the excess, 3.5 tons per person, multiply by 450 million, multiply the price per ton, you put this money here.
Leave me a comment. I will be looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Have a good day. Bye-bye.